Robert knows who I am. I'm Sergeant Jonathan Howard with the Phoenix Police Department. Last Tuesday night, August 22nd, we had a lot of activity in downtown Phoenix. We know it started with a visit from President Trump, Vice President Pence, several other dignitaries, and thousands of people gathered to hear and voice opinions. The Phoenix Police Department was there to ensure public safety. Prior to the events, we spent countless hours working with community groups, law enforcement, both the local, the state, the county, and the federal level, Phoenix Fire, and a host of other partners to plan and prepare for the day's events. As we know, despite many hours of peaceful assembly, the end of the night was marred when some people, concealing themselves within the crowd, began to intentionally create disruption. These people began assaulting the officers who were there to protect them, as well as had fights of their own within the crowd. Based on experience, intelligence gathering, on-the-ground observations, and active acts of violence by some people, police were forced to respond by dispersing the group. A variety of methods were used to do this: police presence, announcements, warnings, personal interactions, some individual arrests, and ultimately smoke, gas, and impact projectiles were used. The decision to use these tools is not taken lightly. Although the goal is to target those individuals actively engaged in criminal acts of violence, we understand that some others in the area may feel the effects. Lessons learned from communities across the country and the world have proven that if left unchecked, the disorder in these situations increases rapidly. Recently, mass violence, mass damage, mass injury, and even death has occurred in other communities. Since the incident, we have been reviewing video from a variety of sources. Although we are still early in our review of these events, we've been able to put together a compilation from a variety of sources, including security cameras and social media sites. Please understand, this is not a final product. We are still reviewing the incident and expect to learn more as we progress. The video I'm about to show you will provide a perspective, that's it, a perspective not yet publicly seen. With that said, no singular perspective is all-inclusive. We get that. As we go through, I will point out some things that I think are important to see and to understand. Let me reiterate, this is not a final product. We are early in our review. This is meant only to provide some additional perspective. Before we begin, I want to encourage anyone who has video or other evidence to submit it to our Professional Standards Bureau. They can email those items to commendcomplaint@phoenix.gov, or they can call our Professional Standards Bureau and work it out with them at 602-262-4580. Vince is going to play the video for me. Again, it's about 13 minutes long. For those that may be live streaming, be aware there may be some objectionable language in here. We have done our best to compile this in a manner that is reasonably accurate as far as it goes a timeline. We've used different methods to match that timeline, but we are well admitting this is an edited video, a compilation video, and we're doing our best to give you a perspective of what occurred. The videos that we have that come from security cameras, perhaps at the convention center, will be available through public records requests. So with that, let's begin the video. So I think we all agree that the beginning of the day started nicely. We had community response officers on scene. These are the plainclothes detectives that you see interacting one-on-one with the crowd. These are the officers that meet with the community groups in advance of these types of events to explain to them what's permissible, what's not permissible, to help them manage their own groups and demonstrations. As the day progresses, emotions tend to rise a little bit. We see small pockets of people getting disruptive, arguing with each other, fighting with each other. Again, police officers remain calm. We're there to keep the peace. We're there to separate people, not prevent them from using their First Amendment right, but to keep them safe from harming each other. When necessary, our officers stepping in between people going against each other with their voices. Additional direction, the officers are mixed amongst the crowd to ensure they have a true feel for what's going on. for the emotions that are going, for the vibe that is going on throughout the afternoon. Pause it for a second, Vince. We're going to see this fence quite a bit, but understand this fence, this may or may not be the exact one, but along Monroe, we worked with our federal partners. Remember, the President of the United States and the Vice President and other dignitaries are in the building right there. We worked with them to create a safety zone for public safety. What this does, it allows us an area to work freely. It allows our fire department an area to have ingress and egress should that be necessary. It allows ambulances, police cars, fire trucks, other law enforcement vehicles into that area. That's why this was established as an additional security zone prior to the event, part of our original planning.
That's along Monroe?
I think this one's along Monroe. We're definitely going to see the vast majority of this video is along Monroe. What I want you to also notice, in addition to metal pedestrian fencing, this yellow tape right here is police line, indicating do not cross, police line, making it very clear this is a line. Good. You can see it's starting to get a little darker. Tensions continue to flare. Emotions are starting to get the best of some people, but we remain focused on those people actively engaged in disruption. Here come some of our community response officers. They talk to the people, separate them, and allow the vast majority to go on continuing with their First Amendment rights. Continue to progress. We see some additional disturbances, and we can sense that the vibe is changing. We see people in the crowd becoming more agitated, but still a relatively peaceful assembly. People coming through here, no shirts, bouncing off people, running through, yelling. Again, that just tends to enhance the entire negative tension in these types of events. Here we are on Monroe, Donna, where we have that pedestrian fencing, and we can see our first time when people identifying themselves with the Antifa signs arrive at the location. So these signs become very important as we progress through this for a variety of reasons. Our intelligence gathering, our experience in past practices lets us know that excuse me, they use those signs to conceal their identity. They use those signs to conceal their actions. And ultimately, they use the poles on those signs not only as weapons, but to dislodge and to turn over pedestrian fencing and police line fencing like we see here. The officers on the scene that day were seeing the people behind those flags putting on masks, passing things back and forth. We believe those were water bottles. We believe those were frozen water bottles and other bits of ice. You see they've moved up to the fencing. Pause it right there for a second, Vince. So what they've done, they've moved up because at this point, and we'll see it here in just a second, they're going to try to do a couple of things. But ultimately, they're going to try to breach this fencing, enter our safety area. That is problematic for a variety of reasons. Most notably, at this exact time, this is when the president is leaving the building. He is coming out into this area to be driven away from his rally. At the same time, all of the people who were inside the rally are now egressing and about to join this group in the streets. There was also quite a few people that were not able to make it in, that were still waiting in line, and they just found out that they weren't going to make it into the rally. They are also egressing. So we have a bit of a head coming together. We need to ensure that we maintain some order and some public safety so people don't get hurt. This pedestrian fencing, so you know, is mechanically tied together, and then it's also zip tied together so that we can ensure that it stays intact. The downside to that is if they use their signs and they topple that fencing, the entire line of fencing goes, including all of these people leaning against that fencing. There's concern that that would create a crush hazard, not only to those people, but then it would prevent emergency services coming in to come to their aid. Go ahead. Say? Oh, as we look here, I think we've heard some people talk about it being a very crowded section. It was a crowded section. Thank you. But behind the group of people, you can see there's about 30 or 40 feet most of the night. We actually opened up an overflow section to allow people area to safely stand. As people start to egress, you're going to see how quickly they are free to walk away from this area. They can't come to the south because of the fencing, but they're very free to leave to the east, to the west, or to the north. Again, we have the officers down here. They're not wearing gas masks. They're not wearing anything other than helmets. The reason that they're wearing helmets at this point is because for several hours now we had sporadic incidents of people throwing things at us. When we say things at us, we know that they were throwing water bottles. We know they were throwing frozen water bottles. We know they were throwing bricks, rocks, shoes, and other things, including things that were lit on fire, were coming in at us. As you look closely, you'll see, it's hard to see in, amongst all the crowd, but as it comes through, you'll see things flying through the air. This had been going on for several hours, not at any given time where there's multiple projectiles a minute for any given period of time, but over the course of several hours, officers were having things thrown at them. Right now, they're trying to breach our fence. Officers are using pepper balls. They're targeting only those people actively engaged in violence. Only this small group attempting to breach the fence is being targeted. What they're also doing is they're not using them as impact weapons at this point. They're using them to disperse powder. That's why they're striking the ground, so that the powder has an effect on this select group of people, hoping to leave all of these people out of harm's way because they're not doing anything wrong at this point. You'll see that very few of these people are immediately impacted. Yet those people that were engaged in that act are certainly stopped with their actions. That's exactly what we wanted. And in fact, the tactical commander who runs this operation at that point put everybody on hold and said, let's wait for this small dispersal of agents to take effect. Our hope is that we can disperse the group creating the chaos and the hazard while allowing the vast majority to stay and continue to voice their opinions and concerns. What happens, unfortunately, is as these people disperse, they don't leave the area. They actually intermingle and conceal themselves within the crowd. It is very difficult to tell the difference between somebody who was just engaged in that behavior and somebody else next door. There is no special jersey or anything that they wear. What you will see is that some of them are wearing masks. Some are actually, he's wearing a gas mask, I believe. You'll see people in helmets. You'll see other people concealing their identities in other ways. You'll see people with backpacks. Many of those people in the backpacks are carrying gas masks prior to anything, and they're carrying, again, frozen water bottles, and other projectiles. Again, you can see the officers calmly standing down here, monitoring the events, not wearing any gas masks. We have no reason. We have not dispersed any agent into the air. You can see how quickly these people, many of them, have chosen to leave. This group is choosing to remain. It should be pretty clear that this is now an unlawful event. Early on, we heard the chief talk about them dispersing gas at us first. And that's what I want to show you here. It's going to switch angles because we've been able to compile these videos from several different angles that I think are most impactful. Pause it. This was not ours. We do not have gas that looks like this, that reacts like this. There's a couple other things that I need you to see. Pause. Hopefully you can see it bouncing through, sparking along the way. We know by its volume, its color, everything else, that is not ours. Additionally, I think it's very important to point out that we don't deploy gas behind our lines. It would be in front of our lines to dispel people and encourage them to leave the area. What you also notice is that these officers are not wearing gas masks, right? We would not deploy gas without allowing our officers to put their gas masks on because they become ineffective. So it should be very clear that this gas came in before we used any gas in this area. Pause one more time. The trouble with them using gas is multiple. It ups their level of violence, and more concerning to us is we do not know what type of gas they are using. Right? We can see it's in the air, we can see it's been dispersed, but we don't know its health hazards. We don't know what it's going to do to all of these people in the area if they inhale it, if they breathe it, if they touch it. We don't know how it's going to react. We know the type of agents that we use, we know the health hazards. We measure those health hazards against the risks that we are now facing, and we deploy them safely, and we deploy them after extensive hours and hours of training. This is a gas we do not know, and we do not know its impact on our community. That man that was filming that went inside to get away from the gas, and then you really couldn't see much from that angle, so that's why that video got cut at that location. This man here, you might recognize him from other videos. You can see he's wearing a gas mask. Again, we have not deployed any gas yet. He's already armed himself with a gas mask. Again, if you watch closely, you'll see projectiles coming in. You'll see these officers are not quite masked up yet, but very shortly they will be putting them on. After that other one, they've gotten the command, put your mask on. They've deployed some type of agent against us. And then again, one of the officers recognized that it may be similar, but we don't know what it's mixed with. So our officers begin to mask up. You can hear people in this section yelling at people, stop throwing things at the cops. You can hear them yelling, peaceful protest. Again, if you look back at the other angles, you'll see the officers are not engaged in anything. They're standing there monitoring the activities while people within the crowd are pleading with others, stop throwing things. You're going to watch over here. It'll be circled shortly. Officers are masking up because of what we've already seen. Did it go, Vince? Not yet. Again, switch to better angle. So we're going to see another gas canister come in. It's going to land over in this general area right here. While these officers are in the process of putting on their mask, it would not be our practice or anyone's practice that does this to deploy something without allowing our officers to protect themselves first because they become ineffective. You see this small plume of smoke, some type of gas. We have not identified it. We're concerned. We're concerned for officers. We're concerned for the safety until we know exactly what it is and what hazards it presents. Notice the size. It's pretty minimal. When we look at some of the gas that we ultimately do put out, you'll see that ours has a much greater volume. Again, non-responsive officers are standing, they're monitoring, they're watching, they're working under the direction of one or two incident commanders. This right here is the first time that we deployed any type of smoke. Play it out. When I say smoke, that is different from gas. Smoke is just that. It is an inert smoke. It is meant to encourage people to leave the area. It does not have any tearing. It does not have any effect on a person's breathing or anything like that. It is inert. It is smoke only. It is meant to encourage people to leave the area. We hear people saying throwing bottles, and you'll see more things come in. You'll see our guy up here again. No, we missed him. That's all right. Throwing canisters back at us. Pause it for just a sec, Vince. So a couple things when it comes to people throwing canisters back. When we deploy canisters of gas or smoke, we deploy it into a specific area that we have chosen to allow people to safely egress from the area. It is not meant to harm them. It is meant to encourage them to leave the area. When people pick them up and throw them back at us, they have zero training in the hazards. They have zero training in where to throw them. And they end up throwing them in different locations that were not intended. So it may end up being more chaotic because they are creating it by expanding out the area where the gas or smoke is being deployed. Back up just a sec, Vince. Right before that one that comes in and hits them. That's it. Okay.
Is that all police stuff going on now, or can you differentiate?
So what I can tell you is that I can't be certain, Donna. Most of this is probably police stuff, and most of it is probably smoke at this point. Shortly, we're going to get into other agents, but right now this is mostly smoke, mostly police. But we know there has already been at least 2 other ones put out by others. You can't tell what it is by the color. It's kind of the manufacturer, what they had in stock at the time, and kind of what we got. It doesn't tell you whether it's smoke or whether it's a different agent. These people clearly are not trying to leave. They're trying to be there. Sorry. Hopefully you saw that flaming one come in, strike that officer on the leg. That went quick. And bounce back out. Based on the volume, I don't believe that to be ours, but I can't be 100% sure. If you look at this one here, this is the type of volume that we look for in our equipment. That was obviously a much lower volume. Again, calm, controlled response from police. They remain under the direction of incident commanders. We don't have officers running around. We don't have officers chasing people around. Our goal right now is that people leave the area safely. We've provided encouragement through them. Some of the things that we're going through as we watch this, oh, let's see a flag. Did I miss it? So up in this area you'll see it. It's quick. One of the flags came in on a long pole, type of a javelin coming in. As we progress through some of our tools that we use, it starts with our verbal presence. It starts with an officer in uniform. And then as we progress and we put helmets on and we put shields on and we make announcements and we do different things, those are all intended to get people to stop criminal behavior and or leave the area. At this point, we're not pushing anybody anywhere. We're encouraging them to leave. A few minutes later, this had mostly cleared out, but we have a duty to continue. We can't just allow them to go to the other side of the building, create damage, create violence, create additional criminal acts of violence or whatever it is they intend to do. We need to make sure that we keep them in check, that they are kept nonviolent, that they are kept from criminal acts, and that other people in the area are safe. This is Monroe. Monroe, as we move north from here, we know we have open roadways, right? We have Washington, we have Jefferson, or we have Van Buren. We have open roadways to the public, and we now have a large crowd going in that general direction. The incident commanders move the officers up, again, controlled. We're not running around, listening to their directions. We now have the helicopter back overhead. We've been talking about announcements. Pause it for just a second. We could not get our helicopter in earlier because they were waiting for FAA clearance to get into that zone. It's an aircraft like any other. They need to work with our tower, and as soon as they got permission to enter that area, they did so, and they began to make announcements. As you can see, this lights up a little bit here and there. That is our aircraft lighting it up. Our aircraft is making announcements, encouraging people to disperse the area. Prior to this, in addition to all of the visual cues we were giving people, we were making individual announcements to people on the scene. We were really trying to target those people that were actively engaged in criminal acts. It's not our goal to tell everybody you have to go home. It's our goal to tell those people that are engaged in criminal acts you have to go home. And unfortunately, they did not. They did not stop. They continued to increase their level of disruption and violence, and that ends up having a negative impact on everybody. So I talked about the fencing being connected and cut. Our officers have gone up. They've cut the fence at a particular spot that we had predetermined. They've moved through, and now they're going to go move up and make sure that the crowd is continuing to disperse and, again, not create additional criminal acts. There's a couple of pauses in this, sorry. Here's our guy again with his gas mask that many of you probably recognize. Another flaming object thrown at police. Here you see masked people. You see people with bags. You see people with packages of water bottles wearing masks. They are throwing those water bottles, frozen or not, at police officers. We have other people, again, wearing masks. We have people over here just filming. We have people concealing and unconcealing their identity. Right here, if you look in this, you'll see a flaming object thrown at police. Have not been able to identify what that object was, but it's very clear as you look at different levels of video that it is on fire when it is thrown at police. Again, we have them throwing things at police, and we have them redistributing our gas canisters. Again, that creates additional hazard because it puts it in an area that we did not intend. Here's our guy yet again, still engaged in activity. You can hear the announcements from the helicopter being made now. And we're up to Van Buren at this point. You can see here, it's an active roadway. We have other people coming into the area. We have people traveling through the area. Again, officers, controlled line, acting under specific instructions from their commander. So that's where we are right now. I worked very hard not to provide opinion. I tried to keep this fact-based on what we were seeing on the thing. I think it's important that if somebody's wearing a gas mask and police aren't, their intentions are likely different than ours. I think it's important to point out that if a gas canister is deployed behind our police line when our police officers are not wearing gas masks, it's more than likely not a police gas canister. So some of those things I'm trying to provide perspective. I'm not trying to dissuade anybody from their opinion or from their perspective, just trying to provide one additional perspective that we've seen thus far. At this point, we are continuing with our review. Our Professional Standards Bureau is conducting that in conjunction with our Downtown Operations Unit and our Tactical Response Unit. Again, if anybody has video links, information, evidence that they think is important to this investigation, please encourage them to either email it to commendcomplaint@phoenix.gov or call our Professional Standards Bureau at 602-262-4580. I can do my best to try to answer a few questions, but again, I want to remain fact-based at this point. I don't want to try to surmise some things. I'll get to you in just one second. And understand that we are early in our review. We do expect that we will learn new things on a near daily basis.
Before the event, the chief said that you were in contact with, various law enforcement agencies and also community groups, activist groups, whatever. Did you have any knowledge ahead of time that these people were going to be out there?
We did have some indications that there were going to be people coming to the scene intent on causing disruption. Absolutely.
I don't exactly know what you guys are calling them. I think foam projectiles or whatnot. When did those come out? I don't know if you...
Sure. So foam projectiles, when we're using an impact weapon, and it's not a perfect system. Let me say that in advance. There may have been people struck by impact projectiles that were unintended, but our intent is to only use impact projectiles against specific individuals engaged actively in violent activity. And that may be the people that are picking up the gas canisters and throwing them back at us, throwing weapons at us, throwing frozen water bottles at us. So those are intended to strike only those people actively engaged in that conduct. So it comes after announcements, it comes after uniforms, it comes after smoke, it comes after gas. It comes quite a long way when we have some people left that aren't heeding all these other warnings to leave the area.
Can you specify what those projectiles were? Were they rubber bullets, wooden dowels? What were they?
They are foam batons is what they're called. They're blue foam batons. I think some of them are black just by, again, manufacturer. But they're a soft foam, have a lower kinetic energy than some of the other weapons that we've heard about in the media last few days. They are intended to strike a person but not to create permanent damage.
Sergeant, point of clarification. The gas canisters, at least two, that you believe were thrown by some of the protesters.
Yes.
Came after you used pepper balls against the Antifa folks.
Yes, they did. They came after we used pepper ball at that specific small group of people, and I think we could see from the video that it did not have a great impact on the other people around them. We were able to keep it contained to that area, but yes.
So we can rule out rubber bullets.
Tom?
There were a lot of percussion explosions in that, and there was also a lot of fireworks flying into the crowd of the protesters. Any idea if that was the organized group trying to cause chaos?
So I heard that there were some firecracker type things. We have noisemakers. We have things that are visually and audibly sensible that are not targeted at any crowd. They are not shot into the crowd. Their design is to startle the crowd to, again, encourage them to leave. Speaking with the tactical commanders, there were fireworks that were seen that were not delivered by us. So if they were fireworks specific, I can't say. Unfortunately, the area was cleaned very quickly, and we're just not finding some of these items that were thrown and used.
I can tell you one went off right near me, and my ears have been ringing ever since.
Right.
So all of those bangs that were going off overhead too, those were not from you?
I know some of them would have been from us.
Those were flashbangs, the large booms?
They're not flashbangs. They are, I forget the exact term, but they are designed to go out above a crowd and have an audible effect and somewhat visual effect.
Can you detail exactly what items you did use? You mentioned foam projectiles, not flashbangs, but the noise makers. What else did the officers use?
So at this point, I don't want to get into every specific thing that we use. If you had a specific question, I can tell you yes or no, we did not use it.
Did you use tear gas?
We use CS tear gas, yes. And
that,
OC gas too.
In that video, in any of that video, can you is it identifiable which one was the tear gas?
It's not. So the first ones that we saw were smoke, the inert smoke, to encourage people to leave. When that did not have the desired effect, that's when we use CS and OC gas.
John, you said.
So yesterday at the council meeting, a lot of folks who got up, expressing their displeasure with what took place there. A lot of people said that there was not enough adequate warning for the masses who were not there to harm the police to get out of the way before any of this was deployed. So can you just explain, because I know you mentioned there was one-on-one contact with people who seemed to be agitators. So can you explain just kind of how that worked and why some folks are claiming that they had no idea this was coming, and as soon as it happened, they had to run or were trampled or whatever?
Sure. So we're early in the investigation. I can tell you that making our announcements and the audible level our announcements is certainly one of the things that we're looking at if we can do better next time. But I can tell you that announcements were being made. We were using amplification equipment earlier, about half an hour earlier, but it might have been at a slightly different location. Remember, what we're seeing right here and where most of these events occurred was along Monroe, between 2nd and 3rd Street. But in fact, we had this many people almost all the way around the convention center. We had people down on Washington, we had Jefferson, we had all these other areas that were concerning to us. So some of those people are showing up and saying, hey, I heard the announcement. Other people are saying they didn't. Some people in certain locations heard more than others. So if somebody says they didn't hear, I'm not going to dispute them by any stretch. I can tell you that our officers were making announcements during it, and some of our expectations are, some of our other visual and audible impacts are equally encouraging to people to leave the area.
One more question. You mentioned that the police helicopter was not able to get up in the air immediately once things started to kind of explode a little bit. Was that because was that due to the airport or the vice president leaving?
It's due to controlled airspace. So it's just controlled airspace that's common in our area. It did not have anything to do with that.
John, you said that you'd had projectiles thrown at your officers for hours prior to this. That's the first I've heard of that. So what was the response to those incidents, and why was it different than what happened around 8:30?
Again, because it was sporadic, it was few and far between, it was lighter out. We had officers that could still go out and do their best to identify specific individuals, but it did not come to the level that it did at this point, and it did not come with somebody trying to breach the gate. It did not come at a point of egress. It did not come at a point when the president was leaving the building, and it did not come at a point when unidentified, unknown hazardous gases were being dispelled into the air by them. So it was a totality, Sean.
Were police planning on releasing this footage today, this early, or is this sort of a response to what happened last night at the city council meeting?
We have been working on this since Wednesday morning. And if anybody wants to go on social media, look at any of the sites, YouTube, Vimeo, Twitter, I mean, it is out there. We're doing our best to just sort through massive amounts. Today's the day we were able to get enough together where we felt comfortable that this was a reasonably accurate portrayal of one perspective.
Would you say this was a chaotic scene?
I would say that if you were in the crowd, you may have perceived this as a chaotic scene. I think what I'm trying to show and what we could see is that the officers were not in chaos. The officers were well controlled. The officers were in a line. The officers were listening to directives from their incident commanders and cleared this area in about an hour, I think, from the time this really got kicked off until the time the downtown area was pretty much clear and safe was less than an hour.
Was all of this video from officer, lapel video, what you just showed? Was it all officer video?
No. This comes from security cameras at the convention center. It comes from handheld security cameras by some officers. And it comes from open sources like YouTube and things like that. We are in the process still of reviewing those officers' body-worn cameras that were present on the scene. But to be honest, I think this is going to capture a little bit better. But we did have officers on scene that night wearing body-worn cameras. We are in the process of reviewing their supplements and reviewing their video. And that will obviously be available as we get through it.
And one more thing, sorry. Did you determine what kind of gas that the protesters did throw at you?
We do not. It dissipated into the air. An officer with an immense amount of experience recognize that at least a component of it seemed to be CS, which is similar to what we use. But again, we're unsure if it was mixed with anything, so that's part of the reason for the urgency to clear the area.
Why in this situation did you guys not try to go and arrest the handful of agitators to allow the other protesters to stay there?
It is way more challenging than one would think. Again, as soon as they got pushed back from the fence, again, this is time of egress, this is time the president's leaving, all this stuff is going on. We have not just the section that we're seeing on video, but we have thousands and thousands of people that we need to help manage and to keep safe. For us to get through the pedestrian fencing opens up that safety zone. We would need to get over that into the group. And then again, they intentionally conceal their identity within the crowd. So by the time we make it through there, it's just extremely, extremely challenging. When you guys have your own copies of this video, look and see. You'll see at some point when we have that overhead view that there is a man that throws something and very casually does it, kind of backhanded, turns, and he's in the crowd that fast. And even watching from an overhead position 100 times on camera, you'll see how challenging it is.
Were any officers intermixed in the crowd at the point when things started to come to a head?
No, they were not at this location.
Any reason why there weren't any officers there?
It becomes a hazard to everybody. It becomes a hazard to those people intent on causing harm, that now we may have officers in this group that we can't get to because of the crowd, because of the pedestrian fencing and everything else. So we pull them out to an area of safety.
When you talk
I got time for about one or two more.
When you talk about them breaching the fence, that was right before you threw those initial pepper balls to disperse what you're identifying as the Antifa group.
Absolutely. One more?
Real basic question. I'm not sure if you touched on it yet. I apologize if you did. The public's going to want to know if you guys have set some sort of timeline on how long it's going to take you all to review. Weeks, months?
So I don't have that, to be honest, Dave. I know that we're going through it. The sheer volume of video evidence at this point, I think we could see that half those people in the crowd or more were filming. As those continue to be posted online, we're doing our best to review all of those. So it could be some time. It just depends on, as we progress, the information that continues to come into our Professional Standards Bureau and what we see. I would hope that within 4 to 6 weeks we'd have a much better understanding of what went on, but I certainly can't make any promises.
Do you quantify that, John? How many pieces of video, how many police statements, how many reports?
I can't.
Are you guys still looking with the video that you have, still looking to make more arrests in this situation, or is this just, are you just going to review this, or what's happening now?
Yes, absolutely. Part of the group that is reviewing this is our assaults detectives. As our assaults detectives are able to identify criminal behavior and match that with a particular individual, if we can identify and make an arrest, we will continue to do that. Thank you all for coming. I appreciate it. See Phoebe at the door for a copy of the video. Again, I really think it's important to provide the perspective with the video. The one you're going to get has no perspective. It's just what you saw up on the screen. Thank you.